Welcome everyone. Today we begin our exploration of a fundamental topic, the evolution of management thought. The way we manage organization today didn't appear out nowhere. It is built upon a rich history of ideas, experiments and principles developed over the last century and beyond. People have been shaping and reshaping organizations for many centuries. In this lecture, we will trace the stories of how our understanding of management has grown and changed from a simple focus on task to a complex understanding of pupils and systems. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to first understand the historical context that created the need for modern management, particularly the rise of the classical school. Second, you will be able to identify and differentiate the three main pillars of that school: Taylor scientific management, Weber bureaucratic management, and Fayol administrative management. Third, we will discuss the important shift toward people, explaining the social system approach and the human relation movement. Fourth, a key part of that movement, we will analyze the groundbreaking Hawthorne experiment and their findings. And finally, we will cover the most recent development in management theory, including the management science school and the system approach and the contingency approach. So let's begin with a basic question: why do we even need management theories? People have always worked together in a formal organization such as Greek and Roman armies, the Roman Catholic Church, and large trading firms like the East India Company. These early organizations provided models for leadership, but the real turning point, the event that created the urgent need for professional manager, was the Industrial Revolution. This period brought about the emergence of large scale businesses. Suddenly, you had massive factories, often with ongoing routine tasks manufacturing complex products. The old ways of managing a small workshop simply wouldn't work. This new industrial world required a new way of thinking, and different school of thoughts begins to analyze management based on experiment and observations. The first major school of thought to emerge was the classical school, which began around the year 1900 and continued into 1920s. The primary focus of this school was on the organization's structure and its management. This approach is all about efficiency. The classical writers, who we will discuss like Taylor, Fayol and Weber, placed their emphasis on planning, technical requirements, formal structure and clearly defined principles of management. A key assumption they all shared was that people at work behave in a rational and logical way. As our slides show, this school incorporates three major viewpoints: scientific management, administrative theory and bureaucracy. Let's dive into the first of this viewpoint, scientific management, which was prominent from 1890s to 1940. This theory is most closely associated with its founder Frederick W. Taylor, who is often called the father of scientific management. Taylor theory focused intentionally on the relationship between the worker and machine. His core belief was that organizational productivity could be dramatically increased by improving the efficiency of the production process. How do you do that? Taylor argued you must find the one best way to perform any given job. Jobs were to be designed to economize on time, human energy, and other resources. Tasks were standardized as much as possible with specific procedures that workers had to follow with no exception. In Taylor's own words, scientific management means knowing exactly what you want men to do and seeing what they do it in the best and the cheapest way. Taylor didn't just guess. He performed definitive study, many at the Bethlehem Steel Company, many at the Bethlehem Steel Company. To improve productivity, he would scientifically examine the time and motion details of a job, develop a better method for performing it, and then train the workers in that exact manner or exact method. He also introduced revolutionary concepts like specific rest period and a differential pay scale, a piece rate that increased as workers produced more. The results were astonishing. With his methods, Taylor increased the workers' output from 12 tons per day to 47 tons per day. His entire philosophy rested on the four basic principles. First, the development of a true science of management to determine the best method for each task. Second, the scientific selections of workers to ensure each worker was given the task for which they were best suited. Third, the scientific education and development of that workers. And fourth, fostering intimate, friendly cooperation between management and labor. To put this principle into action, Taylor developed several mechanisms. A key mechanism was work study, which is an organized, systematic and objective analysis of the operational efficiency of all elements of a job. Work study itself can be broken down into four parts. First is method study. This aims to find the single best method of doing job. Motion study. This analyzes all the movement of a worker make with the goal of eliminating unnecessary motion to conserve energy. Time study. This is the process of recording the exact time taken to do a job, which is then used to set a standard time for that task. And fatigue study. This is undertaken to understand the level and nature of a fatigue and to find ways to eliminate or minimize it on the job, such as through mandated rest periods. Perhaps Taylor's most complex idea was functional foremanship. Taylor believed the traditional single supervisor role was too demanding. He suggested splitting the supervisor job among 8 functional bosses or specialists. 4 of these bosses worked in the planning department, focusing on the mental work. First, the instruction clerk, who prepared detailed instruction for the workers. Second, the route clerk, who determined the exact sequence of work operations. Third, the time and cost clerk, who kept records. Fourth, the disciplinarian, who ensured rules were followed. The other 4 bosses worked in the doing or shop department, focusing on execution. First one is the gang boss, who prepared all the tools and materials for the job. Second is the speed boss, who ensured work was done efficiently and the optimal speed. Third is the repair boss, who ensured machines were in proper working condition. And last is inspector, who ensured the work met quality standard. While this led to higher productivity, it was also criticized for over specialization, which created monotony and resentment among workers. Now let's move to the second pillar of the classical school, bureaucratic management theory. This theory, which was influential from the 1930s to 1950s, is associated with Max Weber, the father of modern sociology. While Taylor focused on the task on the shop floor, Weber focused on the overall structure of the organization. He analyzed bureaucracy as the most logical and rational structure for a large organization. This theory stressed the need for a strictly defined hierarchy governed by clearly defined regulation and lines of authority. He suggested organizations develop comprehensive and detailed standards operating procedure for all routine tasks. Weber's bureaucracy is founded on what he called legal or rational authority. This means authority is based on law, procedure and rules, not on the personal qualities of an individual, which he called charismatic authority. According to Weber, efficiency in a bureaucracy comes from these key features. First, clearly defined and specialized functions. Second, a hierarchical form of strong lines of authority. Third, a reliance on written rules and procedures. Fourth, technically trained bureaucrats. Fifth, appointment to position based on technical expertise, not who you know. And finally, promotion based on competence, with clearly defined career paths. This brings us to the third and final pillar of classical school, which is administrative management. This approach shifts the focus again. If Taylor focused on the worker and Weber on the structure, this theory emphasizes the manager and the function of management itself. The key figure here is Henry Fayol, a French industrialist known as the father of modern management. Fayol was a director at a large French mining company. In his famous book General and Industrial Management, he developed a framework for studying management. He was the first to identify 5 key functions that all managers perform. He said managers must plan, organize, command, coordinate, and control. These 5 functions are still taught as the foundation of management today. In addition to the 5 functions, Fayol also identified 14 principles of management, which he saw as general rules for successful organizations. Let's look at the first 7. First is division of work. Work should be performed by people specialized in that task. Second, authority. Manager must have the right to give orders and expect them to be followed. Third, discipline. Worker must be obedient and respectful of the organization. Fourth, unity of command. This is a famous principle. It states that an employee should receive order from only one person with authority. Fifth, unity of direction. The organization and all its employees should be dedicated to a single plan of action or set of objectives. Next, subordination of individual interest to general interest. The organization's goals must always come before the goals of any one individual. Next, remuneration. The organization must recognize the economic value of its employees and pay them fairly. Continuing with Fayol's final 7 principle, it is centralization. This addresses the question of whether an organization should be centralized or decentralized. Fayol noted that this depends on the situation and communication factor. Ninth, scalar chain. This refers to the continuous chain of command, the line of authority that moves from the top of the organization to the bottom. Orders. Next is order. Everything, both people and resources, has a specific place where it belongs. Next is equity. Fairness is critically important in all management employee relations. Next, stability of tenure of personnel. High employee turnover is a disruptive to an organization. Shared experience is valuable. Next, initiatives. Workers should be encouraged to be productive and motivated. 14th and final is esprit de corps. This is a French phrase meaning union is strength. Fayol states that there must be harmony and unity within the organization. So let's briefly recap the classical school. This school gave us 3 powerful and enduring viewpoints. From Taylor, we got the focus on efficiency, standardization, and the one best way on the subfloor. From Weber, we got the idea of a rational, hierarchical structure based on clear rules and legal authority. And from Fayol, we received the foundational functions of management and the 14th principle of administration. But this school of thought was not perfect. As we noted, Taylor was criticized for job over specialization, which often led to worker resentment, monotony, and high turnover. More broadly, the classical theory, with their intense focus on structure, rules, and tasks, were often seen as dehumanizing. This rigid view of organizations and people would soon be challenged. That challenge led to a new way of thinking. One of the first was the social system approach, developed by Chester Bernard, who is considered the father of this school. This approach presents a radical new idea. It views the organization not as a machine but as a cooperative social system. It composed of people who work in cooperation. Bernard argued that an organization only comes into existence when there are people in communication with each other. and they are willing to cooperate for a common purpose. His most important contribution was the recognition of the informal organization. This refers to the social interaction and networks that don't have a coordinated joint purpose. Bernard argued that executives should encourage these informal organizations as it serves as a vital means of communication and build group cohesiveness. Bernard's ideas were a bridge to the human relation approach, also known as the behavior school. This school emerged as scholars trained in sociology, psychology, and related fields began to propose more effective way to manage people. This was a significant turning point. Finally, more attention was given to individuals and their unique capabilities in the organization. This approach is defined by a major belief that organization would prosper if its worker prospered as well. This is when we see the creation of the first human resource departments. This school emphasized that money, while important, is not the only one factor of motivation. Other socio-psychological factors are just as, if not more important. It recognized that workers act as a member of informal group and that these groups set norms that influence behavior. The most famous and powerful evidence for the human relation approach came from Hawthorne experiment. These were a famous series of studies conducted at the Western Electrical Company between 1927 and 1932. The person most associated with this study is Elton Mayo, who is regarded as the father of the human relation school. This experiment started with a simple classical style question. The first was illumination experiment, which aimed to test the effect of lighting levels on employee performance. They placed one group in a room where the light remained constant and another group where the light varied. What do you think happened? The output is both groups increased steadily. The researchers were forced to conclude that lighting was not the important factor that thought it was. This puzzling result led to more experiments. In the relay assembly test room experiment, researchers selected 6 female workers and made frequent changes to their working conditions, such as shorter hours, rest periods, hot lunches, and a friendly supervisor. As expected, productivity increased. But the truly shocking finding was that productivity remained high even after these positive changes were withdrawn. It was observed that socio-psychological factors like recognition, attention, and a sense of group belonging had a greater influence on productivity than the physical conditions. In another study, the bank wiring observation room study, a group of 14 workers were put on a group incentive scheme where their pay depended on the group performance. Based on scientific management, their output should have increased, but it didn't. Why? The group had developed its own norms of performance and used social pressure to enforce them, holding back production. The Hawthorne experiment, along with a mass interview program, which found that just letting workers talk freely improved morale, led to several major findings that changed management forever. First, an organization is a psychosocial system, not just an economic or a technical one. Second, the behavior of an individual is dominated by the informal group of which he or she is a member. Workers act and react as members of a group, not just as individuals. Third, this informal group have their own norms and beliefs that influence attitudes and performance. And finally, the key takeaways: social and psychological factors exercise a greater influence on employee behavior and performance than the physical conditions of work. Let's pause for our second recap. The classical school with Taylor, Weber, and Fayol gave us the foundations of organizational structure, efficiency, and administrative functions. But as we just saw, this view was incomplete. The social system approach from Chester Bernard and the human relation approach proven by Elton Mayo's Hawthorne experiment forced a necessary and dramatic shift in thinking. They proved that an organization is not just a machine, it is a psychosocial system. They taught us that informal group, a sense of belonging, and two-way communications are just as important, if not more important, than rules or pay rates alone. No discussion of management thought is complete without mentioning Peter F. Drucker, a leading management consultant and a highly influential writer. Drucker viewed management as the dynamic, life-giving element in any organization. He stressed that management is more of a practice than a science or a profession. His most famous and enduring contribution, introduced in 1954, was the concept of management by objective or MBO. Drucker believed that organization needed a principle that would give full scope to individual strength and responsibility, while at the same time giving common direction and harmonizing the goal of the individual with the common organizational goals. MBO is a method of planning, setting standards and appraising performance, where a manager's results are measured by the contribution they make to the success of the enterprise. Around the same time, another school of thought was developing, one driven by mathematics and technology. This was the management science school. This approach actually began during World War II, when Great Britain desperately needed to solve new complex problems in warfare. With their survival at stake, the British formed the first operations research teams by pooling the expertise of mathematicians, physicists, and other scientists. These operational research teams were able to achieve significant technological and tactical breakthroughs. After the war, these procedures were formalized into the management science school. Its popularity grew with the emergence of high-speed computers, which helped managers use quantitative models to tackle complex, large-scale organizational problems. This brings us to more recent development that form our modern understanding of management. One of the most important is the system approach. Rather than dealing with various segments of an organization separately, this approach views the organization as one unified, purposeful system composed of interrelated parts. It tells us that the activity of any one segment or subsystem affects the activity of every other segments. This approach helps managers see the organization as a whole and as a part of a larger external environment. A key concept here is a synergy. The idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In organizational terms, this means departments that interact cooperatively are more productive than they would be if they worked alone. This approach also distinguishes between a closed system which does not interact with its environment and an open system which does. Finally, we came to the contingency approach. This approach is perhaps the most practical. It was developed by managers and researchers who tried to apply the concept from all these different schools of real life situations. What did they find? They found that methods that were highly effective in one situation failed in produce the same result in other situations. This led them to a simple, powerful conclusion: there is no single best way of doing a thing. So, what is the manager task? According to the contingency approach, the manager task is to identify which technique will, in a particular situation, under particular circumstances, and at a particular time, best contribute to the attainment of the management goals. In simple terms, the manager's action must be contingent upon or dependent on the organizational situation or environment. To conclude our lecture, we have seen how management thought has evolved significantly. The practice of management is as old as civilization, but its systematic development began in the mid 19th century. We started with the classical school and its focus on efficiency, structure and principles. We then saw the critical reactions of the human relation school, which brought people, groups and psychology to the forefront. We saw the quantitative power of the management science school and the holistic view of system approach. Today, modern management theory is a rich mosaic of all these ideas. We understand that we need the efficiency of the classical school, the human understanding of the behavioral school, and it depends adaptability of contingency approach. This rich history provides the essential foundation for all modern management practice. Thank you dear learners for your attentive listening and active participation during the lecture. Your focus and enthusiasm truly made the session meaningful.